In the year 2175, Earth stood at the forefront of intergalactic peace, a beacon of diplomacy and technology within the Galactic Federation. After centuries of turmoil, humanity had earned its place among the stars, forging alliances with alien species and contributing to a thriving interstellar civilization. The once divided Earth had blossomed into a hub of innovation, its people determined to carve out a future free of the mistakes of the past. But even as humanity basked in its newfound glory, a dark secret lurked, one buried deep in the heart of the moon. Dr. Elara Cruz, a brilliant young scientist working at the Lunar Research Station, had dedicated her life to studying the moon's geology and uncovering its mysteries. She had always been drawn to the moon's surface, believing there was more to it than the barren rock that it appeared to be. Her obsession had led her to investigate a series of anomalies that had been recorded over the past few years, strange, inexplicable readings that suggested the presence of something hidden beneath the moon's surface. On a routine excavation mission, Elara's team uncovered an ancient, long-forgotten military complex buried deep beneath the regolith. It was an enormous structure, its walls etched with symbols from a time long past, and its systems powered by a technology far advanced compared to anything humanity had ever seen. At first, Elara thought it was some ancient relic, perhaps a remnant of a long-extinct civilization. But as they delved deeper into the complex, they found a message. The signal was faint, like a whisper lost in the vastness of space. It seemed like just another cosmic anomaly at first, but Elara, with her expertise in quantum communication systems, recognized something different. This signal was a cry for help, a call from beyond the stars. Working with her team, Elara painstakingly decoded the transmission. As the cryptic data flowed onto her screen, her heart skipped a beat. The message was fragmented, but the words were unmistakable. "We are the Lost Legion. We are coming home." Her fingers hovered over the keyboard in shock. The Lost Legion. It sounded like some forgotten chapter from Earth's history, a military unit that was said to have disappeared without a trace during humanity's first interstellar war. The story had always been shrouded in mystery, with only rumors of an elite force sent to defend humanity's colonies against a dark enemy, a force that vanished into the void, lost to time. The existence of the Legion had been classified, but Elara knew of it, of course. Everyone did. It was part of Earth's secret history. Elara contacted her superior, Admiral Niven, but the discovery was too large to be contained. The signal had been sent out across the galaxy, reaching far beyond Earth's borders. Within hours, the Galactic Council was notified. The message had been received, and with it, a warning: the Lost Legion was returning. No one knew what that meant, what kind of warriors they were, or what threat they posed, but the galaxy was about to find out. As Elara stood alone in the quiet of the lunar facility, the enormity of her discovery began to sink in. She had just uncovered the first piece of a puzzle that would alter the course of history. The Lost Legion had been lost for over a century, but now they were coming back. And humanity was about to learn just how much its past had been forgotten. The discovery of the Lost Legion sent shockwaves through the Galactic Federation. Within days, the news reached every corner of known space, and speculation ran wild. Some saw the return of humanity's forgotten warriors as a sign of strength, a rebirth of the past that would ensure Earth's place among the stars for centuries to come. Others, however, feared the consequences of awakening such a powerful and enigmatic force. After all, the Legion had been lost for a reason, and no one truly knew what had become of them in their time away. On Earth, Dr. Elara Cruz was summoned to the Lunar Research Station's command center. The cold, sterile walls hummed with activity as the station was transformed into a high-security base of operations. Military officials, scientists, and top-tier diplomats from the Galactic Council gathered to discuss the implications of her discovery. It was clear that this was no longer just an academic pursuit. It had become a matter of galactic security. The decision was made quickly. The moon base would be fully activated, and a team of scientists and military personnel would travel there to investigate further. Ilara, despite the weight of her findings, couldn't shake the feeling that the deeper they went, the more they were opening a door to something dangerous. The complex under the surface of the moon was far more advanced than anyone had imagined. As the excavation team breached the entrance, they discovered a vast underground facility, massive, ancient, and eerily preserved. The walls were covered in strange alien script, and the air carried the faint scent of long-forgotten machinery. The central chamber was dominated by the Vanguard, a colossal warship that had once served as the Legion's flagship. Its sleek, battle-scarred surface gleamed under the pale lights, untouched by time. But it wasn't just the ship that held Ilara's attention. It was the thousands of stasis pods lined up in rows, each containing a soldier frozen in time. As the team worked to open the first pods, it became evident that these were no ordinary soldiers. They were human, yes, but unlike any humans that had ever been seen on Earth. Each one was enhanced, physically, genetically, and mentally, augmented with alien technology. The Lost Legion had not only fought for humanity's survival, they had been the tip of humanity's spear, transformed into something more, something unstoppable. The first pod to open revealed the face of a man who had been frozen in time for over a century. His eyes flickered open, a deep blue gaze filled with confusion and rage. He sat up with surprising speed, his movements fluid and precise, despite the disorientation that followed his sudden awakening. Commander Marcus Kane, the leader of the Lost Legion, had returned. "Where am I?" Kane's voice was low, thick with the gravel of a man who had fought countless battles. His eyes scanned the room, taking in the unfamiliar sight of humans, alien soldiers, and the sterile surroundings of a modern base. Ilara took a cautious step forward. "You're on the moon. You've been in stasis for over 100 years." The words seemed to mean little to Kane. His gaze sharpened as memories flooded back, lost comrades, battles fought on distant worlds, and the moment of their disappearance, swallowed by a cosmic rift that no one had ever understood. He stood up, his movements deliberate, as if reacquainting himself with his body. "The Inheritors," he muttered, as though remembering a long-forgotten nightmare. "We were betrayed. They didn't just kill us, they erased us." The room fell silent as the gravity of his words settled over the gathered team. The Inheritors, a name known only in whispers. It was a species said to have been humanity's greatest enemy, their motives shrouded in mystery. The truth was, no one really knew what had happened in that lost war, only that the Lost Legion had been sent to stop them. Kane's eyes locked onto Ilara's, his voice cold but urgent. "The war never ended, and now we've been woken up, because they're coming again." The weight of his statement sent a chill through the room. Ilara felt a surge of fear, but she didn't know whether it was because of the mystery of the Inheritors, or because she realized that the Lost Legion, the saviors of a forgotten war, had just returned to find that humanity's peace might be nothing more than a fragile illusion. The battle that had nearly destroyed the galaxy so long ago was about to be reignited, and the Legion was back to finish what they had started. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Humanity's history had been written in blood, and now the lost warriors of Earth had returned to fight once more. The months following the awakening of the Lost Legion were fraught with tension. Commander Marcus Kane and his warriors were disoriented by the galaxy that had moved on without them. The peace humanity had painstakingly built with the Galactic Federation now felt fragile, a delicate facade ready to be shattered by the ghosts of a war long past. Yet the Legion was no longer a forgotten relic. They were a force to be reckoned with, their combat prowess unmatched, and their loyalty to humanity unwavering. But there were also cracks forming in the alliances that had once seemed so solid. The Galactic Council had initially been wary of the Legion's return. Their ancient training, their enhanced bodies, and their battle-hardened minds were seen as both an asset and a threat. How could such a force be trusted in a galaxy at peace? Could the Legion be integrated into this new world without endangering everything humanity had worked for? These questions hung over Ilara Cruz and the other scientific leaders who had played a part in reviving them. Despite the Council's cautious stance, it became clear that the Lost Legion's presence was necessary. The Inheritors, their old enemies, had been silent for over a century, but their name had not been forgotten. The signals intercepted by Galactic intelligence pointed to strange, unexplainable events near the Outer Rim, where no Federation ships dared venture. Entire colonies had gone dark, their communications cut off, their fleets vanishing without a trace. Ships that ventured too close to the void, a region of space thought to be a barren, uninhabitable wasteland, were found drifting lifeless, their crews mysteriously gone. Kane knew what that meant. The Inheritors had returned, and they had likely been preparing for this moment for years. The Legion's mission was clear: track down the source of these disturbances and confront the Inheritors before they could reach Earth. But Kane wasn't blind to the reality that they were heading into uncharted territory where even the most advanced Federation ships hesitated to go. The Void was an area of space beyond the reach of established galactic trade routes. It was a vast, desolate expanse of broken planets and abandoned systems, where few dared to explore. The Inheritors had once ruled over these dark corners of the galaxy, and now, it seemed, they were regrouping. What exactly they were planning was unknown, but Kane had a gut feeling that the galaxy was about to be thrust back into the nightmare of the past. The Lost Legion, however, was built for this kind of mission. Unlike the peacekeepers of the Galactic Council, whose diplomacy and advanced technology could not always solve the galaxy's deepest problems, the Legion had been forged in the fires of war. Kane's soldiers were not just trained in tactics. They were warriors whose bodies and minds had been augmented for the sole purpose of survival in the harshest environments. And while their loyalty to humanity was absolute, they were also haunted by the memories of their last mission, the one that had left them stranded for 100 years. Under Kane's leadership, the Legion embarked on a daring journey into the void, boarding the Vanguard and charting a course into the unknown. As they neared the edge of the galaxy, an eerie silence fell over the crew. The vastness of the void felt almost oppressive, as though the fabric of reality itself was distorted by the weight of the past. There were no stars here, no guiding lights, just the endless blackness. Ilara Cruz, now officially a member of the Legion's advisory team, found herself struggling with the implications of the mission. She had always seen herself as a scientist, a seeker of knowledge, not a soldier. But as the Vanguard hurtled through the void, Ilara couldn't ignore the sense that she was part of something much bigger than herself, something that transcended her own understanding of the universe. As they ventured deeper into the void, Kane gathered his crew on the bridge. His face, always stern, now carried the weight of 1,000 battles. "We don't know what we're going to find in these dark corners of the galaxy," he said. "But we know one thing: we're not going in to negotiate. We're going in to end this war, once and for all." His words were cold and final. The tension in the room was palpable, but Kane's conviction gave the Legion something they hadn't felt in a long time: purpose. And as the Vanguard disappeared into the endless black, there was no turning back. The Lost Legion had returned to the galaxy to finish what they had started, and nothing would stop them from reaching their goal. The fate of humanity, the galaxy, and the future itself hung in the balance. The Inheritors' return was just the beginning of a war that could consume everything. And Kane had no intention of letting that happen again. The deeper the Vanguard sailed into the void, the more the crew began to feel the oppressive silence that surrounded them. The galaxy had become a distant memory, and the black void ahead felt like a place outside of time itself. Their sensors showed nothing: no stars, no ships, no signs of life. Just the endless expanse of darkness, a reminder of how far they had strayed from everything they had known. But even in this desolate place, something moved in the shadows. It started with faint, erratic signals, ghostly, fragmented transmissions that would appear on their scanners, only to vanish moments later. At first, Kane thought it was a glitch, a trick of the void. But Ilara Cruz, ever the meticulous scientist, saw patterns. The signals weren't random, they were being sent deliberately. They were a warning, or perhaps an invitation. Kane convened a strategy meeting with his senior officers, including Ilara. His face was grim as he addressed the crew. "We've crossed into enemy territory. We don't know how long the Inheritors have been operating here, but we can't keep playing this game of cat and mouse. We're walking into a trap." Ilara stood next to the command table, her mind racing with the implications. The Inheritors had been silent for over a century, and now, with the Legion's return, they were signaling something, a message, perhaps, to test the waters or to draw them into a confrontation. What was clear was that they were not afraid, and neither was Kane. "We need to find them," Kane said, his voice like steel, "and when we do, we'll finish this." The Vanguard pushed forward, following the distorted signals deeper into the void. The crew grew restless, their nerves frayed by the uncertainty. Ilara had never seen Kane so focused, so driven. His every move seemed calculated, as if the weight of a century of lost time bore down on him. He was a man determined to put an end to an ancient war that had nearly destroyed everything he knew. Then, on the 5th day, it happened. The Vanguard came upon a massive, abandoned space station, so large it seemed to stretch on forever. It had once been a hub of activity, but now it was a shell, decaying and drifting in the dark. Ilara could feel the hairs on the back of her neck stand up as they approached. The station was eerily quiet, its power long since gone, but Kane didn't hesitate. He ordered the crew to prepare for a boarding mission. As the team boarded the station, they discovered a horrifying sight. The walls were lined with hundreds of stasis pods, just like the ones that had held the Lost Legion. But these pods weren't filled with the Legion's soldiers. They were filled with grotesque figures, their bodies twisted and distorted beyond recognition. The Inheritors had been experimenting, altering themselves into something far more terrifying. Their once human forms had been reshaped into monstrous, almost unrecognizable beings, something between man and machine. "This was their breeding ground," Kane muttered, his voice dark with disgust. "They're not just a threat to humanity. They were humanity's creation, something far worse than we ever imagined." Ilara moved cautiously toward the nearest pod. She had seen enough of the Legion's cryostasis chambers to know how they worked. But these were different. The technology was advanced, but the life forms inside were grotesque. These were not soldiers, they were bioengineered weapons, living tools meant for war. And something told her that these creatures were the least of their problems. "Commander, we need to get out of here," Ilara said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This station, it's a trap. They're watching us." The words barely left her mouth before the silence was shattered by a low mechanical growl. The Inheritors had known they were coming, and they were ready. From the shadows, figures emerged, tall, imposing, and inhuman. Their eyes glowed with an eerie, unnatural light, and their movements were precise, like predatory machines. These were the first of the Inheritors Kane and his soldiers had seen face to face. But as they advanced, Kane's face hardened. These were not the same Inheritors they had once fought. These were something new, something far more dangerous. "Get ready," Kane ordered, his voice commanding, as his soldiers fell into position. "This is where it ends." The battle had begun, and there was no turning back. The Legion's enemies had revealed their true faces, and the galaxy's fate was once again on the line. The battle erupted with brutal intensity. The Inheritors, their mutated bodies glistening with an unnatural sheen, moved with terrifying speed. Their glowing eyes tracked every movement, every shift in the air, like hunters stalking prey. Kane's soldiers, augmented by the very same technology that had given them their strength, stood their ground, but there was no denying that this was unlike any war they had fought before. "Take cover," Kane barked as a barrage of energy bolts tore through the room, narrowly missing the team. The Inheritors' weapons were unlike anything the Legion had encountered in their time. They were faster, deadlier, and seemed to adapt to every maneuver the soldiers made. Alara ducked behind a control panel, her mind racing. The Inheritors were not just enhanced, they were evolved. They had been waiting, building, learning in the dark corners of the galaxy. This was no mere skirmish, this was a reckoning. As one of the Legion's soldiers, Lieutenant Jace Morrow, sprinted forward to engage the closest Inheritor, his plasma rifle blazed with green light. The creature's armor absorbed the shots, its eerie eyes flickering as it advanced, unperturbed. Morrow swung his rifle to strike with the stock, but the Inheritor's elongated arm shot out with blinding speed, knocking him back with a metallic crash. "Kane, they're too strong," Morrow gasped, pulling himself up. "We need more firepower." Kane was already on it. "Alara, get to the central console. We need to activate the station's weapon systems." Alara hesitated for a moment, but the look on Kane's face made her realize there was no choice. She sprinted toward the console, ducking under energy bolts that singed the air around her. She reached the central hub, her fingers dancing over the controls. The interface was alien, but not entirely foreign. There were elements she recognized from the Legion's technology, things she had studied in her research on their past. Come on," she muttered under her breath as she tried to establish a connection to the station's power grid. The atmosphere felt charged, thick with the hum of energy, as if the entire station were holding its breath. Behind her, the Legion was fighting a losing battle. The Inheritors were relentless, their movements too fast, too precise. Kane, standing at the forefront, engaged the largest of the Inheritors, his weapons clashing with the creature's glowing blades. Sparks flew, and the sound of their combat echoed through the station like thunder. "Alara, we don't have much time," Kane shouted as he dodged an energy blast, his arm bleeding from a deep cut. With a final, desperate push, Alara found the override command and initiated the station's automated defense systems. The central core hummed to life, and massive turrets emerged from the walls, swiveling toward the Inheritors. Their glowing eyes flickered in unison, recognizing the shift in the power dynamics. Targets locked, a mechanical voice echoed throughout the station. "Firing in 3, 2, 1. A barrage of firepower erupted, bathing the Inheritors in blinding beams of energy. The first few shots landed directly on target, causing the mutated enemies to stumble back, their bodies scorched and disintegrating. But even as the weapon systems unleashed their fury, the Inheritors did not retreat. Instead, they adapted. Their bodies shimmered, shifting in response to the energy fire, and they seemed to grow stronger, their regenerative abilities keeping them in the fight. Kane, bloodied but unbroken, lunged forward with a roar, his blade drawn, and cleaved through one of the Inheritors. It collapsed, but the others were already moving to fill the gap. Alara gritted her teeth. She had to do more. She needed to buy them time, to give them a chance. The station's defense systems were overwhelming, but they weren't enough. They needed to be more precise. Her eyes flickered across the terminal screen, searching for a way to enhance the power output, to focus the fire. That's when she saw it, a schematic for a self-destruct mechanism. If she could reroute the station's energy through the main reactors, she could overload the system and wipe them all out. It was risky, too risky, but there was no time to hesitate. "Commander Kane," Alara shouted, her voice piercing through the chaos. "I can overload the reactors, but we'll need to get out fast. We have to move now." Kane's eyes locked with hers, and for a moment, there was nothing but the understanding between them. This was their only chance. "Everyone, fall back," Kane ordered. Move out now." The soldiers, battered and bloodied, began their retreat as Ilara rushed to finish her work. The inheritors were relentless, closing in fast, but as the countdown for the reactor overload began, the station shuddered with the hum of impending destruction. "Get to the Vanguard," Kane shouted as the team sprinted down the hallways toward the ship. The Vanguard was their only hope, and they had mere minutes to make it out. Behind them, the station began to tremble, the reactor core pushing toward its breaking point. The inheritors roared, realizing they were losing their hold. But it was too late. The countdown hit 0, and the entire station exploded in a massive burst of light and energy, sending shockwaves through the void. As the Vanguard soared away from the blast, the crew watched the devastation unfold behind them. The station and the horrors within were gone. But the inheritors were still out there, and they knew this was just the beginning. The war had truly begun, and the path ahead would be filled with even greater challenges. The Vanguard raced away from the explosion, the shockwave from the station's destruction still rippling through the void. The crew sat in stunned silence, watching the distant glow of the station's remains, knowing that they had just survived a battle that could have wiped them out entirely. The station, a stronghold of the inheritors, was gone, but the feeling that the war was far from over weighed heavily on everyone's minds. Kane stood at the helm, his eyes hard as stone. He never allowed himself the luxury of celebration. He knew better than anyone that this moment was but a brief respite. The inheritors were still out there, their mutated legions ready to strike, and they had only scratched the surface of the enemy's true power. "Ilara, report," Kane ordered, his voice gruff. He was always businesslike, never willing to show weakness, even after the close call they had just endured. Ilara Cruz, who had spent the past several hours in the ship's medical bay ensuring the wounded were stabilized, approached the command center. Her mind was still reeling from what she had seen on the station. The inheritors had always been a myth, an ancient enemy, a forgotten chapter in humanity's history. But now the myth was flesh, and the brutality of their transformations sent a chill through her. "I've scanned the data we recovered from the station," Ilara began, her voice steady but weary. "The inheritors are building something. I'm not sure what yet, but it's not just a military force. They're constructing massive fleets, something beyond anything we've seen before. We've only seen a small fraction of what they can do." Kane absorbed this, his expression unwavering. He had already expected as much. The inheritors hadn't just retreated into the void. They had been rebuilding, preparing, and that meant that their next move would be even more devastating. "We need to find out what they're planning and stop them before they can launch whatever they're constructing," Kane said, turning to his officers. "Ilara, I need you to dig deeper. I want every scrap of information we can find about their plans. The Federation may have their hands full with political infighting, but it's up to us to keep this war from going any further." Ilara nodded, her resolve hardening. As much as she had feared what lay ahead, she knew there was no turning back. The Legion was humanity's shield, and they were the galaxy's last hope against the Inheritors' twisted vision of domination. "I'll get to work immediately," she said, before turning to leave the room. The Vanguard pressed onward, the distant stars their only guide as they journeyed further into the void. It was a barren, lifeless expanse, but it had become the heart of the Inheritors' operations. The Federation had all but abandoned these regions, writing them off as uninhabitable or irrelevant. But the Legion knew better. This was no mere corner of the galaxy. This was the stage for a war that would stretch across worlds. Weeks passed as the Vanguard continued its deep space reconnaissance. The crew grew weary, the weight of their mission sinking in. Supplies dwindled, and their encounters with Inheritor scouts became more frequent. Small skirmishes broke out, but nothing compared to the horrors of the station. Every time the Vanguard emerged from an engagement, it felt like they were only delaying the inevitable. Every battle seemed to feed the enemy's hunger, making them stronger, more coordinated. It was Elara who finally uncovered something that could turn the tide. "I found it," she said, rushing into the command room, her eyes wide with a mixture of excitement and fear. The inheritors aren't just rebuilding their forces. They're constructing something huge, a weapon, something that could destroy entire fleets in a single strike. Kane's face hardened. He had known that the inheritors' return wouldn't be a simple conquest, but the implications of this new weapon sent a cold shiver down his spine. "Where is it?" he asked. Elara pulled up a star chart, zooming in on a distant system on the edge of the void, a place no ship had ventured for generations. "They've been building it here, in secret. A weapon capable of sending out a wave of destruction, strong enough to disable entire planetary systems. If they finish this, they'll have the power to obliterate Federation defenses across the galaxy." Kane stood motionless for a moment, the weight of her words sinking in. The Vanguard had been running on limited fuel, and their crew was exhausted. But if they didn't act now, the weapon would be complete, and they would lose the war before it truly began. "There's no time to waste," Kane said, his voice resolute. "Prepare the ship. We're going in, and we're taking the fight to them before they can finish this weapon. No one else is coming to save us. This is our war, and we're the only ones who can end it." The crew, hardened by their struggles, rallied behind their commander. The course was set. The Vanguard would push deeper into the void than it had ever gone before. The inheritors had built their weapon in the heart of darkness, and the Lost Legion was ready to march straight into it. The final battle was coming, and humanity's future rested on the shoulders of the soldiers who had returned from the void. There was no room for fear now, only victory or death. The Vanguard pressed forward into the heart of the inheritors' territory, its engines humming softly as the crew prepared for what would likely be their final push. The void was an endless black sea, swallowing all light and warmth, leaving the ship to drift through an ocean of cold silence. As they neared the system where the inheritor's weapon was being built, the tension on board was palpable. No one spoke much anymore. Every minute felt like a countdown to an inevitable confrontation. Kane stood at the command center, his face set like granite. His eyes were bloodshot, his body exhausted, but his mind was sharp as ever. He knew the stakes. This was it. The weapon the inheritors were constructing had the power to wipe out entire fleets in a single strike, and if it wasn't stopped, it would leave humanity defenseless against the coming tide of destruction. There would be no second chances. "Elara, status report," Kane said, his voice cutting through the quiet like a blade. Elara Cruz, hunched over a bank of consoles, didn't take her eyes off the screens as she responded. "We've detected heavy defenses around the system's primary planet, an artificial asteroid belt designed to shield their base from detection. It's a trap. We'll have to navigate through the debris field to get close enough for a strike." Kane's jaw tightened. "We don't have the luxury of stealth. We need to hit them hard and fast before they can deploy the weapon." Elara looked up from her terminal, her expression a mix of determination and unease. "The Vanguard is in peak condition, but I've never seen anything like the defenses they've put in place. We're talking weaponized asteroids, energy mines, and automated interceptors. If we try to breach, we'll be cut to pieces before we even get close." Kane took a deep breath. "Then we'll have to make our own path. Prepare the crew for evasive maneuvers. We're going in hot." Minutes later, the Vanguard was skimming the edge of the asteroid belt. The ship's hull vibrated as small rocks and debris scraped across the shields. In the distance, the inheritor's base loomed, an enormous structure built into the side of a gas giant's moon, surrounded by the remnants of shattered moons and wreckage from long-forgotten battles. It was a fortress designed to withstand any assault, and it was here that humanity's last stand would take place. "Here they come," Elara said, her voice tight with concentration. On her screen, the first wave of enemy interceptors appeared, sleek, armored ships that darted from behind asteroids like angry wasps. Kane wasted no time. "All hands, battle stations," he shouted. "Prepare for combat." The Vanguard shuddered as it entered the asteroid belt, weaving through the floating debris with a precision that only years of battle-hardened experience could provide. Alara guided the ship expertly through the maze, her fingers flying over the controls as she expertly dodged blasts from enemy interceptors. Outside the ship, the battlefield was chaos. Explosions lit up the dark as enemy interceptors and the Vanguard's weapons traded deadly fire. The small, agile Inheritor ships swarmed around them, their pilots moving with unnerving synchronicity. Each ship seemed to know exactly where to strike, as though they were linked by some hive mind. "Engage point defense cannons," Kane ordered, his voice steady despite the mayhem outside. "Focus on those interceptors." The ship's defenses flared to life, sending bursts of energy in every direction. In the cockpit, Alara's hands were a blur as she initiated evasive maneuvers, twisting the ship through narrow gaps in the asteroid belt, while narrowly avoiding a deadly barrage of enemy fire. The ship groaned under the strain, its hull rattling with the impact of several near misses. "This is insane," shouted Lieutenant Jace Morrow from his post on the gun deck. "We can't keep this up forever. They're overwhelming us." Kane's eyes narrowed. "We don't need to fight them all. We just need to get through." The Vanguard surged forward, blasting through a path of asteroids and debris, the ship groaning as it took heavy hits. Alara's face was set in grim determination as she pulled the ship into a final dive toward the moon, where the Inheritor's weapon was being constructed. The base loomed ahead, a massive structure crawling with automated defenses. Turrets on the surface fired streaks of energy at them, but the Vanguard was too fast, narrowly slipping past the shots. "Alara, give me a clean shot," Kane called, standing at the command console, his eyes fixed on the target. His hand hovered over the firing controls. "I'm almost there," Alara replied, her voice tight. "One more turn." Suddenly, a massive explosion rocked the ship as a mine detonated near the port side. Sparks flew and alarms blared, but Alara's quick reflexes kept the ship from spiraling out of control. "We've got hull damage," she yelled. "Shields are holding, but we've lost a few systems." Kane looked at the damage reports, his mind working faster than the crew could react. "Stay on course, we're almost there." The ship dove low over the surface of the moon, and Kane's finger slammed down on the firing controls. A volley of high-powered missiles launched from the Vanguard's belly, rocketing toward the heart of the Inheritor base. As the missiles reached their target, a massive explosion erupted across the base. The moon shook as the weapon's core was hit, sending shockwaves through the surrounding area. The Inheritor's base crumbled, the structures falling into disarray as the weapon itself began to fail. But Kane knew this was only the beginning. As the smoke cleared, they were already preparing for the next fight. The Vanguard's mission was far from over. The war was about to escalate, and this victory would be short-lived if they didn't strike the heart of the Inheritors once and for all. The explosion that rocked the Inheritor's base lit up the sky like a second sun, a blinding flare that painted the cold expanse of space in waves of fiery orange and red. But Kane knew that their victory was not absolute. The base was in ruins, the weapon destroyed, but the Inheritors had far more at their disposal. This wasn't the end of the war. It was a battle won in the larger fight for humanity's survival. The Vanguard had crippled the enemy's plans, but it would take more than this to defeat the Inheritors once and for all. "We've got incoming," Alara shouted, her voice breaking through the control room's tense silence. Her eyes were glued to the displays, which flickered with the appearance of new enemy ships emerging from the nearby asteroid fields. More Inheritor vessels, reinforcements, no doubt, drawn by the explosion. They were ready to retaliate. Kane gripped the edge of his seat, his gaze unwavering. "We don't have much time. Get us to the extraction point now, Alara, full throttle." The Vanguard lurched forward as Alara punched in the coordinates. The ship shuddered, its engines pushed to the limit, but there was no choice. They had to escape before the inheritors could muster a counterattack. Behind them, enemy ships were swarming like locusts, their sleek forms cutting through space with deadly precision. The Legion had dealt a significant blow, but the inheritors' wrath was just beginning. "Lieutenant Morrow, are the aft guns ready?" Kane asked, his voice sharp as he studied the tactical readout. "Ready, sir," Morrow responded, his face a mask of grim determination. "But we can't keep them off forever. We need to outrun them." "Do what you can. I'll handle the rest." Kane turned back to Elara, who was already pulling every ounce of power from the Vanguard's engines. The ship barreled forward, weaving in and out of debris and wreckage. The Inheritor ships closed in, their weapons flashing in deadly arcs. The Vanguard shields flared under the assault, but they were holding for now. The rear guns fired, sending a hail of plasma shots into the advancing enemy fleet. A few Inheritor ships exploded in bright bursts of light, their hulls ripped apart by the force. But there were too many of them. For every one they destroyed, 2 more took its place, their firepower intensifying with every second. "We can't keep this up," Elara muttered, her brow furrowed in concentration. "They've got us outnumbered. We need to find a way to break through the swarm." Kane's eyes narrowed. He scanned the stars ahead, searching for anything that might give them an edge. And then he saw it, the opening. A gravitational anomaly ahead, a nearby black hole that was pulling in debris and energy. It was their chance to escape. "There," Kane pointed sharply. "Elara, take us through that anomaly. The gravity field will disrupt their targeting systems. We can lose them in the chaos." Elara's fingers flew over the console, adjusting course with milliseconds to spare. "Brace for impact. This is going to be tight." The Vanguard surged toward the anomaly, its engines roaring as they approached the gravity well. The ship shuddered violently as it passed through the first wave of debris, being sucked in by the black hole's pull. The space around them warped and distorted, and the enemy ships had to adjust their trajectories to avoid the incoming barrage of asteroids, space debris, and energy waves. As the Vanguard dove deeper into the gravity field, the Inheritor ships hesitated. The anomaly's disruptive forces were wreaking havoc on their systems, causing their ships to lose lock on their target. Kane could feel the tension rising, but he remained calm. "Keep it steady, Elara. We're almost there," Kane said, his voice low but filled with a steely confidence. The Vanguard plunged into the event horizon, the black hole's powerful gravitational pull warping space around them. The ship's engines screamed as they fought to maintain control, but the crew's experience and training held. The swirling vortex of energy ripped apart the Inheritor fleet behind them, forcing them to retreat or risk being drawn into the black hole's core. "We're clear," Elara breathed, her hands trembling slightly as the ship broke free from the pull of the anomaly. She steadied herself, her eyes locking with Kane's. "We made it. We're—" Suddenly, the ship shook violently, throwing the crew against their harnesses. Alarms blared. Something had breached the hull. "Elara, what happened?" Kane demanded, his eyes scanning the damage reports. We're under attack," Elara said, her voice tinged with disbelief. "One of their ships slipped through. They're in range." Kane's eyes flared with determination. They had survived the most dangerous part of the journey, but the final test had come. One last fight before they could truly escape. "Get us out of here now." "Morrow, hit them with everything we've got," Kane barked, already moving to the weapon systems. Elara pushed the Vanguard to the limit, the ship accelerating toward the edge of the system. The remaining Inheritor ship fired a final salvo, but it was too late. The Vanguard activated its full thrust, blasting past the enemy vessel and into the deep void, escaping the gravitational pull of the black hole and racing toward the Federation's safe zone. Behind them, the Inheritor fleet lingered, but they knew they had lost the battle. The Legion had struck a critical blow, and though they had to leave the battlefield for now, they would return. They had proven that humanity could fight back and win. The war was far from over, but the Lost Legion had shown the galaxy that humanity's will to survive was a force no enemy could easily break. As the Vanguard streaked across the stars, Kane looked out at the endless darkness, a sense of grim hope settling in his chest. The path to victory would be long, but the first step had been taken, and humanity would never stop fighting.